Five of their favorite songs. So it's like a very yeah. What are you excited to play this together? Yeah. I love that. I'm just gonna be yeah. You go see the you can start me. Hello, everyone. I know not everyone's here quite yet, just because of the accident, really bad traffic, but I'm just gonna go ahead and kick it off so we can get this rolling. How many of you guys have heard of BDEI or DEI? I'd love to see it. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over it briefly, kind of explain it, and then our wonderful speakers will go a little bit more in depth for it. So BDEI stands for Belonging, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is a relatively new practice to most workplaces, but a lot of people are implementing it as a way to bring coworkers together. So it encompasses policies, programs, and practices designed to create a more inclusive environment for all individuals. These initiatives are vital not only to the workplace, but also in the college setting, particularly for organizations like PRSSA, where diverse voices foster innovation and creativity. And I can speak from experience, having such a diverse e-board has absolutely changed how we do things. I know we have a much larger e-board than we used to have, and everyone's voices count so much. So BDEI initiatives can include trainings and education, hiring practices, and then policy changes. So hiring to make sure that no one is being discriminatory and that everyone is included. And then BDI initiatives are grounded in the belief that diverse perspectives lead to improved products, processes, and outcomes. They also seek to address issues of discrimination, marginalization, and differing opinions, ultimately enhancing the collegiate experience. Doesn't that sound fun? So I'm going to hand it off to our wonderful speaker. Thank you guys so much for being here, and let me get
Hi everyone, I'm Amina Jones. I'm an SVP at Edelman. We are one of the largest PR firms in the world. So my clients are global, but I am part of the multicultural team. And at Edelman, we define multicultural as a little bit of everything. So race and ethnicity, gender expression, socioeconomic status, geography. We also look at veterans, we look at ability, we look at age. And so when we think about the DEI and belonging space, it really is all encompassing. I would say a lot of orgs lean into the race and ethnicity. We know that is a piece of the puzzle, but because of intersectionality and how we identify as so many different things, it's important that we start to acknowledge that race and ethnicity are a piece of the puzzle, but they're not someone's whole identity. And so wanted to share a little bit on my background, the work that I've been doing at Edelman. I've been at Edelman for 5 years, but have been in the communications and PR space since college. So hoping to make this informal, got me ask questions, but excited to join you.
I'm going to pause you right there. Hello. No, you're all good. Welcome. So bad. Welcome. Here's our other wonderful guest speaker. No, you're all good. We're just doing introductions, and then you guys can just sit up here to have a presentation for us. And okay, this is perfect. Yeah, have a seat. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. So a little bit about me and how I even landed in the multicultural space. There's a lot on this slide, but all the way to the left is my family. They are my everything, and it's not all lost on me the sacrifices they made for me to be where I am and what I'm doing. In the middle is a map with dots. These are all the places that I've lived across the country. And I often tell people before I knew what DEI and multicultural communications was, I was already kind of doing it. And I moved across the country as my dad was climbing the corporate ladder. And so I had to really learn to be adaptable. I was exposed to a lot of different people and cultures, and it really kind of forced me to be an extroverted introvert. And it also allowed me to find my tribe. So at the top, you see some sport. I really learned to express myself doing sport. At one point, I was playing on a travel Portuguese volleyball team and did not speak a lick of Portuguese, but had to kind of figure out how to communicate with each other in order to win a national championship. And we were able to do so. So I feel like multicultural communications was something that I was doing for a long time. All the way on the left is my grandfather. He's the reason why I studied communications and public health. Headed to college, he had a massive stroke in Orangeburg, South Carolina, which is a small rural town. And I decided to do an internship with the head of communications at the hospital system he was rehabbing at. And so it was my first introduction to public health and communications and the deep disparities that exist in rural communities, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And so that then is what set me up to study communications and public health in DC. And so spent a lot of time really understanding health equity and what that means and looks like for our health system. But all of my internships, all of my jobs were actually in the hospitality, entertainment, fashion, communication space. So after school in DC, I moved to Los Angeles, spent almost a decade there, working for a wide variety of brands, BCBG being one of those. And then also worked at one of the largest style houses on the West Coast, shadowing the PR director. And so worked on red carpets, worked on luxury travel brands, styled celebrities, and really got to understand fashion, entertainment, PR, and how that is similar but different to health comms. And then I was ready for a change again, and pivoted back to health communications at a PR agency called Chandler Kiko. It's now Cineos, and started working on over-the-counter brands, as well as things like Botox. So it kind of combined all of my health, wellness, beauty, fashion interests into one space. And then I moved to Atlanta. And that's where I reached out to a recruiter at Edelman, and have been in Atlanta and at Edelman for the past 5 years. So my Edelman journey has been twofold. I feel like I've lived 9 lives in 5 years, but at the center of everything I've done has continued to be that equity piece. And so my team at Edelman, everything we do is DEI multicultural. So I started out as an embed with Wellstar, which many of you should be familiar with. They were in the process of launching their Center for Health Equity and doing a rebrand on people care. And so we had an opportunity to storytell around multicultural communications and what that looks like for a health system of their size. Then the pandemic hit, and I worked with Taraji P. Henson on her foundation, which is focused on mental health. It was the height of the pandemic, at the height of the racial and social justice movement, and they were focused on Black mental health, which was at an all-time low. We're still in a mental health crisis as a country, but they were really focused on spreading the word about their free COVID therapy program, and mostly women were signing up. And so we worked with them to do research on what would drive men, particularly Black men, to take care of their health and to take advantage of free therapy. And so we worked with influencers, we worked with media, we worked with psychologists and therapists across the country to drive men to sign up for that COVID-free therapy program. And we launched a campaign called Silence Isn't Treatment. And it was allowing men to talk about mental health in the spaces that they were already in. So whether you are at work, whether you're at the barber shop with your friends, whether you're out, whether you're at church, whether you're with your family at a cookout, finding the spaces that people were already and providing an opportunity for them to talk about mental health in a different capacity. And so that program, we were able to, in just 2 months, have over 2,000 men sign up for that program. And now it is a staple program for the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation. The second campaign that we did for them was focused on our education system. And it looked at racial bias in the American education system and the impact that continues to have on Black students. And that was called the unspoken curriculum. So we set up small therapy sessions for students, for parents, for teachers, to allow them to talk about the challenges Data shows that a lot of students of color are treated differently in the classroom. And oftentimes challenges at home or outside of school are obviously brought to you with school, but they're treated a little bit more harsher. So you get detention, you're told you're not excelling, but there's no tutor. When there are mental health challenges, you're often not placed with a therapist. And so partnered to create a pipeline for therapists in the classroom so that students would have more than just their teacher to rely on in the education. In addition to that, just before Pfizer was preparing for the COVID vaccine clinical trial, we did a lot to improve diversity in clinical trials. So how many of you know about clinical trials or have a loved one that's been part of one? That's a lot. Typically, people don't know a lot about clinical trials. What we have tried to do over the past 5 years is help educate on representation for many communities of color, and given disparities and systemic racism, people are often hesitant to participate in clinical trials. And so this was an opportunity for us to educate on the importance of representation, what that means for medications, for products, and how those actually impact and support care for all communities. And so leading up to preparations for the COVID clinical trials, we looked at Indigenous communities, Black communities, Hispanic communities in the United States and created a program that would allow them to come into Pfizer and partner to understand where they could have clinical trials for whatever condition they had. And that set us up really well for the COVID clinical trials because Pfizer was able to have more than 50% diversity, which was the first time. We did the same for J&J, but launched their global health equity program. At the height of the pandemic, they launched a $150 million program focused on health equity, and it looked at race, age, socioeconomic status, and geography. And it was called Our Race to Health Equity. And we're now in the 5th year of that, and it's now becoming a staple program for the J&J Innovative Medicine Global Health Equity team. At the bottom, a couple more things I just wanted to flag. My work with Baby Dove. Maternal health is something that I'm very, very passionate about. We know in this country that Black maternal health in particular, we have devastating numbers. And so in partnership with Baby Dove and an organization called the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, we crafted a fund for Black doulas. And so it's an opportunity to increase the number of Black doulas that exist in our country, but also create a space and a fund so people could afford that care. And that is on its 5th year and has grown astronomically. And we're now a stable part of the Black Mamas Matter Alliance. So when people reach out and do research around being a doula, they automatically get added to our fund. And so we've been able to increase that resource. And then just a couple more highlights. I'll share a couple videos with you guys in just a second, but something that's near and dear and that I'm focused on right now is the Advil Pain Equity Project. So Advil, in partnership with Morehouse School of Medicine and an organization called Black Health, we launched Leave My Pain, which is a campaign focused on addressing pain bias in our healthcare system and looking at how it impacts communities all across the country. We started with research on the Black and Hispanic communities, and then next year we'll be focused on ability. But it shares 10 patient stories, all different backgrounds, and how they went to the doctor, expressed challenges, and they weren't believed. And so we, as part of that, have been crafting a course for medical students and nurses that's focused on addressing pain bias. So reteaching, relearning a lot of what you're taught in undergrad and graduate school, and allowing people to see that communities of color, particularly Black communities, do not have a higher pain tolerance, that there is a pain threshold. And when someone comes in with a pain, you do need to actually measure that. And so we created that, and it'll launch at Morehouse School of Medicine in 2 weeks. Pause, it's been a lot before I share videos, but any initial questions?
I know with the pain equity, there's a lot. I read a statistic that was like it was genuinely taught in medical schools that all women, especially no matter race, but even more severe for minority women, their pain threshold was higher than that of men, and it's something that impacts a lot of women even today. I'm sure it's something that a lot of us really maybe have experienced before. So that's just like really interesting, and I just love that you guys are doing that campaign.
Yeah, we are starting with Morehouse School of Medicine, and then next year we'll be scaling to other medical institutions. And we've also created a continuing education course for active medical professionals to take to kind of relearn some of what they've learned along the way. And then the last thing I call out, it's not health related, but for TJ Maxx, we do all of their I&D consults. So they don't use DEIB, they use I&D, so inclusion and diversity. And I feel like every organization uses a little bit of a different acronym. But for TJ Maxx in particular, given where they sit across the globe, they've been really focused on their different consumer audiences. So each quarter we pick a different consumer to focus in on. We had the Hispanic consumer this past month. We're about to do multi-generational. And then this summer we did the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community. And so we help them take the data on the consumers that are engaging with their stores. So Marshalls, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, HomeSense, where those markets are, and then allow them to look at how they can increase their marketing and improve their marketing with those specific audiences. Through influencer, through social, through owned, as well as paid campaign. Oh, well, I'll play a couple videos and then would love to get your thoughts.
What if you were secretly given a grade the moment you walked into your classroom? What if the heaviest weight you carried at school wasn't in your backpack? What if the most impactful lesson you learned in class was never spoken out loud? To shed a light on what goes unsaid but never unlearned by Black students, we created the Unspoken Curriculum, a multi-channel campaign that exposed the racist realities these students face in schools every day. We began this campaign by hearing from the students themselves.
That I can be crumbling inside, like the foundations of the playgrounds I'm supposed to be able to play on, and the only thing anyone asks me is, why didn't I do my English homework last night?
Then we brought notable voices to the table to raise awareness for our cause.
Our children are criminalized. There's no compassion when it comes to our children.
That syndrome that makes you feel like an imposter hits hard because your whole life you read these books about these successful people that don't look like you, then they send you out there and expect you to be successful.
And we gave students the tools and spaces they needed to confront their own experiences. We shattered the stigma of talking about mental health in the Black community. Because when truth can be spoken out loud, it creates a future where change finally becomes possible.
So I'm here to tell kids, if you want to get a higher degree, you can do that. Never let anyone tell you what you cannot accomplish. It all starts
So at age 14, I had already started experiencing excruciating menstrual cramps. It was until pretty much age 24 when it just started getting debilitating. I didn't realize something was growing inside of me, and now I'm dealing with the consequences of the negligence that I've been facing all these years. Was it on me because I wasn't going to the right doctors, or is it that you guys are not paying attention and you just don't care about the pain that I'm experiencing? My name's Eticia, and believe me when I say that suffering in silence is not strength. It can kill.
Initial reaction to either video?
Powerful, very, very powerful.
So everything we do at Edelman is grounded in data. So any campaign, any asset that we create, we make sure that we have the stats, the data to support it. And for both of these campaigns, the data came back showing deep disparity and an opportunity for organizations like Advil to partner with community boards to make a difference. And so for Board Lawrence Henson Foundation, we were able to set them up with corporate partners to keep those programs like the unspoken curriculum going. And then for Advil, we're partnering, of course, with Morehouse School of Medicine and Black Health, and bringing in additional strategic partners for the new year so that we can actually scale the course. Questions? A couple slides on how we think about DEI and incorporate our employee network group. But at Edelman, we leverage organizations and community groups like our internal employee networks as business impact opportunities as well. So in addition to building community across these segments, we also leverage them for focus groups so that we can make sure, again, we're backing everything that we do with IDIs and data. So oftentimes we'll tap folks to, for TJ Maxx, we go to them to see what was your consumer experience in a TJ Maxx store? Did you see cultural things? Did you have a good experience? What was the walk, the layout? What are things that stood out for you? And we take those insights and use them as we're crafting our strategies and our plans. So that is multicultural at Edelman. It is internal and external, but we could not do anything without the internal teams that we have. They reflect the communities that we serve and the communities that our clients are trying to serve. And what's exciting about it is every day is a little bit different. Any questions? Thank you, guys.
How are you all?
Good.
Okay, I am I'm a true Sagittarius, so I do energy, okay? How are you all today?
Good.
It's okay if some people are good. Okay, I'll tell you very quickly, I had a long day. But this is gonna be the highlight of my day because I love talking to the next generation of leaders about DEI and really trying to curate DEI champions across the world. So I'm going to share a little bit about this presentation. I just did this presentation this past weekend at Essence's Girls United Summit, but I did want to share briefly just a little bit about my journey from this presentation, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I do currently. I can go. Potential to me is such a powerful term because you all are sitting in the seats as students, but you all have so much things that you are going to accomplish in life. And I want you all to think about, what was your name?
Amina.
Amina, I want you all to think about Amina's journey. And just quick question, did you think that you would be doing, like, if you thought about marketing, did you think you would be tying marketing to all of these DEI?
No.
I think that today you might think, okay, I'm studying X, Y, and Z, right? I'm looking at communications, but what can that translate to, leveraging the potential that you all have inside of you? And so I'm excited to see what the world is going to see as a result of you realizing your potential. Go to the next slide. My name is Alexis, Alexis Roe. You can find me on all the channels, but I am the Vice President of DEI Impact and Strategic Initiatives with the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. That includes not just the Atlanta Hawks, so people don't know that we also have the College Park Skyhawks, which is our development league. We also have the Hawks Talent, which is a professional esports team. Raise your hand if you knew that there were professional esports teams. Right. I walked in on my very first day of work. They were giving me the grand tour. I saw this big box, clear box of people playing video games. And I said, what are they doing? It's work time. And they said, they're practicing. I said, practicing what? They said, they're practicing, just the different methods and strategies on the controllers. And I said, at work? We draft players, we relocate them. They get paid like players to play video games. And so that's a diversity, a job that I did not know about. And then we also operate State Farm Arena. So a lot of the concerts and Disney on Ice and all of the live events that happen, we manage those as well. You could just skip. So for me, you might see me as this vice president or someone who is on a bunch of boards or who sometimes gets these awards, but underneath all of that, I am a true Guyanese girl. My family comes from Georgetown, Guyana, and I carry that very proudly. That is a contributor of how I became a DEI leader. My family, I am somebody's sister, I am somebody's daughter, I am somebody's cousin, and I do not take that lightly in all of my professional, when I show up professionally or when I show up personally, I am showing up as a representation of them. And so when you think about your careers, think about how your families and your tribes are going to manifest through how you show up for work. I am also somebody's partner. My partner and I have been together for 6 years, and I hold our relationship proudly, but I also hold relationships with my friends very proudly as well. And then I'm a strategic partner, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I do from a DEI standpoint at the Hawks. So I wanted to share a little bit about my journey. And I know the young ladies who came to the Essence Girls United Summit, it might be a little bit of a repeat, but this is so important to me. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an ambassador. I had an aunt, her name is Melissa Sylvester, and she passed away. But every time I saw her, she was the most stylish, beautiful, radiant woman. And I asked her one day, I said, what do you do? And she was like, oh, I work for the UN. So all of a sudden, I wanted to work for the UN because I wanted to dress like her. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to have an attitude like her. And that was what I envisioned my life to be. So when I graduated from college, and I went to Bard College in upstate New York, but when I graduated from college, I looked at the Foreign Service because I said, okay, she works for the UN. She also is a strategic advisor to different presidents. She was a strategic partner to the president of Guyana. And she said the Foreign Service is the way to go. So I was looking and I, investigated, and they said I was going to have to stamp passports for 2 years. And I think if anybody can see me in my colorful ways and being like, I love people and I love to talk about random things, I was like, I'm not doing it. No, thank you. So I ended up not applying. And already right out of college, my path was thrown off, right? I had this vision that I was going to do this thing. And then I said, I'm not doing it anymore because that did not align with how I envisioned my days to be, just sitting at the airport. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to move to China, right? I mean, I think being an ambassador, you kind of have to just take chances. You also have to get international experience. My family's from the Caribbean. I would love to go to Asia. So I just moved to China. I didn't know anybody. I did not speak the language, but I found a job. I became a college counselor and an English teacher, and I was in Nanjing, China for 6 months. I absolutely love China. I would have never left, but unfortunately, I am type 1 diabetic, and I ended up in a diabetic coma because sugar is a spice in certain provinces in China and not a sweetener, and I did not know that. And so it didn't matter that I had characters written down saying, hey, please do not put sugar in my food. One day, one of my friends whose family owned a restaurant, she said, Alexis, I know you show us this, but we're not going to give you something that we do not think is good, right? And I said, okay, well, there's that, because my sugars were all over the place. I ended up having to leave China, but being there, I really had to learn how to trust myself. Imagine going somewhere where you know no one, and then you forgot to turn on your VPN, so you get there, you can't search anything, and you can't access Google Translate. So then you're always looking for a Starbucks or a McDonald's because somebody in there speaks English and can help you. That was my experience. I had to learn how to grow my self-trust, but also I embraced ambiguity. I embraced the world of the unknown and different cultures, and I loved it. When I came back home, it was interesting because after I got the treatment, after I felt like I was healthy again, I was so deflated because every job I applied for, I got declined for. And so I was like, okay, I graduated. Everyone says you graduate, you get a job, and then you get promoted every 2 or 3 years. How many of you heard that when you're going, right? Like you go to college because this is just what you're supposed to do and your life will take off from there. That doesn't always happen. So I unfortunately couldn't find a job. So I ended up being a janitor for 3 years. And then I was a receptionist at Star 94. How many of you heard about Star 94? It's still around, I think. But I was a receptionist at Star 94. And as a janitor and as a receptionist, two professions that people don't necessarily equate strong value to, I felt that, right? I would walk into different people's offices while I cleaned these offices in Buckhead, and I would always bring the same energy that I have today. And I would say, good morning, good afternoon. And rarely people responded. And I thought that was fascinating because I'm like, okay, I'm a person and no one wants to have a conversation with me. Then as a receptionist, you're I call it the director of the welcome experience, because when the fans come, they're super excited. They just want all these tickets on the air and all these things. And then they get to you, you're excited, but then the executives don't even know who you are. So there was a disconnect in my experience. And so I started realizing that people treat others differently based on the value that they assign to them without even having a conversation with them. Then in that, being deflated and questioning my belonging, questioning my value, I had to really figure out what was going on. And I ended up getting really depressed as a result. But then at some point I picked myself back up and I said, okay, I had this goal. I wanted to be an ambassador. So what do? An ambassador speaks authentically on behalf of a country and they advocate for this country. However, how can I get the skills to be an ambassador without having the title? And then I said, okay, marketing. I'll do multicultural marketing. I don't know how this thought came into my head. I was Googling careers and that's what came up. And so I applied for a multicultural marketing agency, Uniworld Group. And so I started working at Uniworld Group as an account coordinator for the Home Depot account, and I was doing the African-American marketing for their agency of record. And I loved it, okay? I never knew what it all entailed with marketing, but all of a sudden, as someone who is perhaps the lowest on the totem pole, if you will, in terms of levels, I was in the studio recording commercials and making sure that they pronounced gluten correctly. Do you all know what gluten is? It's paint. I didn't know that either, but I learned. I also was going to all these different award shows and helping to curate Home Depot's activations. And then Home Depot, they created the Retool Your School Campus Improvement Grant Program. which is a program that retooled HBCU campuses because they saw that HBCUs were underfunded and they needed support in making sure that they did not lose their accreditation. So they retooled their schools, and it was a national campaign. And so I worked on that. And being around HBCU campuses and going to different places and hearing people talk about the history in the buildings and all of those things, it really made me understand the magic of multicultural marketing. At the core, it is DEI, right? You are championing support of some community, leveraging a corporate philanthropy kind of activation. At some point, because, well, I'm not sure like how it is at Edelman, but at Uniworld Group, if a company is scoping for you to work, you have a scope of work, right? And sometimes that scope of work indicates how many people can be on the account. Well, if the account is super flashy and sexy, people do not want to leave. So then at some point you have to decide, am I going to stay in this really cushiony, really fun, really exciting role and not have the opportunity to climb, or am I going to leave? And I chose to leave because the people just loved the Home Depot account. They did not want to leave. And so I had to walk away from an exceptional opportunity. But when I figured out that I wanted to leave, I could not find a job anywhere else. I was applying and applying and applying. And while I was on the elevator one day, I leveraged my energy to just talk to, I told you I just talked to everybody. So there was a gentleman who said, "How's your day?" And I said, "It's good, but," and I shared with him that I've been applying for all these roles. I had no clue who he was. He could have been a new hire at my organization. I was like, let me just take a chance. But I shared with him all of the things that I desired to do. And that day he connected me to somebody who had just moved into the building. And having coffee with someone the next day, the same gentleman that he connected me to, I learned that he started an innovation consultancy. And he was asking me all these questions like, how are you? What do you like to do in life? Tell me about your experience. Tell me about your experience in college. What extracurricular activities did you do in college? What passion do you think that you have to give to the world? And I was sharing all this with him, and he's like, why don't you come work with me? And I said, well, what do you do? And that's when I learned what innovation consulting is. Raise your hand if you know what innovation consulting is. So innovation consulting basically is helping companies to create the next generation of their products and services. So we looked at companies like Coca-Cola and Nike, and we curated experiences to understand the future of what beverages would look like for Coca-Cola or footwear would look like for Nike, right? So say, for instance, if you were invited, maybe, what is a social club that could, let's see. Well, not your social club. I'm saying it's other people. Say, for instance, if when you graduate, if the alumni team says, okay, we want to invite all of you all back for a football game. You come to the alumni tailgate. We're going to give you free food, free drinks, free everything. We just want to create community. But then imagine that there are people there who are seeing, what are you grabbing with your chicken wings? What flavors do you like to mix? What are the combinations that you are going to put on your plate? People looked at that and we created those type of experiential activations to really understand what people like to consume, right? And then there are these people called flavor scientists. How many of you knew that there were flavor scientists? One, two, well, did you know before? Okay, exactly. But now I learned that there were flavor scientists that study all the different parts of your tongue, because the way in which your tongue interprets flavor is completely different than the way somebody else's would, right? And so we have diversity of what we consume and how we interpret different things. And so I learned that, and I thought, oh, okay, and we started working together. Unfortunately, there were a lot of things that happened while I was in the innovation consultancy, and I got laid off. It was around the time of COVID. Y'all heard about that, right? So unfortunately, I lost my job, and I was a student at Georgia Tech in the executive MBA program. And while there, I just said, you know what is the thing that I have seen? Like, what was the theme across all of my professional experiences? In every space, I was learning about different cultures. I was learning about different people, different experiences. And I was really trying to figure out how we bring all of those things together to create synergy in spaces of belonging, right? In China, I had to find community where I thought would be no community and learn different cultures and learn my space in those things, in those places. In marketing, I was championing for the African American community. In innovation consulting, I was always talking about, well, why can't we use sustainable products and release them in these communities? Why can't the price come down? I was always advocating for people. And you'll start to see that there are threads and themes that come as a result of your journey when you graduate from college. I then entered into corporate returnships. Does anyone know what a corporate returnship is? So corporate returnships are basically internships for people who are returning to work after a career break. So before COVID, there was this thing called career break discrimination, where if you applied for a role and you had a gap on your resume, the applicant tracking system would just push your resume out because it's like, oh, gap, they're not qualified. But corporate returnship programs worked with organizations like Fidelity and Wayfair and a bunch of others to really bring people back to work, whether it be people who left work because they were taking a break to raise kids, they went to the military, or any of the other things. They were bringing them back because they knew that they deserved to be able to come back at the level in which they left instead of having to restart their career all over again. And understanding corporate returnships and understanding corporate structures and having to change perceptions, it really helped me to solidify DEI. I want to focus specifically on DEI because returnships, although I love, creating these programs, I was not someone who took a career break. And I said, I want to do work that I can advocate for from my perspective and also champion other communities. And so that's how I ended up in DEI at the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. I applied for a job. And after 7 months and 7 interviews, they said, you are not qualified for the job. But I still continued to apply myself. I sent them different things. I offered different things for our leadership to consider. Things that I said, oh, well, from a strategic standpoint, you can think about this, or have you considered targeting these communities? Here's how basketball can build bridges into the community. And that's how I was able to get a job at the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. I'll just share a little bit about what I do from a DEI perspective. Does everybody know what DEI is? Okay. Oh, it's okay. I'm just going to go into the DEI piece. So at the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena, DEI touches every single department. So we have our strategy for work splitting up between workforce, workplace, and marketplace. The workforce work that we do is all about data, understanding the trends, the patterns, and the behaviors in the talent pipeline, understanding when people are applying to the role, how many qualified candidates from a diverse talent perspective are being pushed to the next level to even be included in the interview process. And then what is qualifying them to get the role and understanding all the trends that happen as a result of that. So for instance, if there are whole teams of people who all went to Georgia Tech, that's not diverse, right? And so we're looking at all of these data to figure out how we can support our organization evolving into being more diverse. We also manage all of our sensory inclusion. So sensory inclusion is understanding that people interpret has a different neurodiversity experience to anything, right? So I talked about how we have basketball, we have concerts, we have all these things. At any given moment, you can go into the arena, there's either a strobe light, a loud noise, or something. And so our sensory inclusion, we make sure that our employees are trained on sensory inclusion, how to support people, fans who come into the arena who might need support. We also have a sensory room, and so we also manage that. We manage things like Mother's Room, our restroom equity projects, and all of those things. All of that is incorporated into our workforce, workplace strategy. Then our marketplace strategy is everything external. So if you think about have you seen any of the things that the Hawks have done in the community? What have you seen that we've done in the community?
Well, I mean, it's talked about like, big events, but I mean, I know that John brought in like community kids with like interactive. Can't really think about the specifics of it, but I just know the basic one of something.
No, yeah, we do a ton in the community. We have a She Leads Women's Empowerment Program. Am I out of time? You're good. I completely.
No, we just have like a little thing, but we can go over right now.
So in our marketplace, we look at what are all the communities that make up our city. Our mantra is to be true to Atlanta, but we know that being true to Atlanta means being true to all colors, being true to all demographics, and we know that we can't be all things for all people, but through the data, we understand where we make our reach, right? We also try to build bridges through basketball. So how can we leverage our platform to uplift? We started a women's empowerment program called She Leads because we saw that there is a disparity between the amount of people who are applying and getting into careers in sports and women climbing into leadership. We saw that there lacked a lot of representation of women in leadership, and we said perhaps it might be a talent pipeline issue. So we created the She Leads Women's Empowerment Program to uplift early career women. So all of the programs that we do leverage basketball to really figure out how we can leverage our platform to lift our community. So I can talk a lot about all of our programs, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to delve deeper into them.
Thank you guys. That was so amazing. Both of you. Okay.
We're just gonna start our